In January 1991, the Somali president was overthrown, resulting in the Somali Civil War. In September, severe fighting between 5 different factions started in Mogadishu, continuing in the following months and spreading throughout the country. By the end of the year, over 20,000 people had been killed or injured. This fighting also led to the destruction of Somalia's agriculture, which led to the starvation in many parts of the country. US forces were tasked with supporting the United Nations relief efforts. However, after several attacks on UN forces and US Marines by warlord Mohammed Farah Aidid, Bill Clinton approved the deployment of special task forces composed of elite special forces. This included 400 US Army Rangers and Delta Force operators. On October 3, 1993, Special Operations Forces attempted to capture Aidid's foreign minister and his top political advisor. Delta Force would assault the target using MH6 Little Birds, and Ranger Chocks would create a 4-corner defensive perimeter around the target building to isolate it and ensure no enemies could get in or out. A convoy would arrive at the building to take the entire assault team and their prisoners back to base. This entire operation was estimated to take no longer than 30 minutes. At 3:52, the MH6 Little Birds hit the target. Next, 2 Black Hawks carrying the 2nd Delta Assault Team dropped their teams, as Ranger Chocks prepared to rope onto the 4 corners surrounding the target building. The ground convoy arrived 10 minutes later near the Olympic Hotel and waited for Delta and Rangers to complete their mission. During the operation's first moments, Private First Class Todd Blackburn fell whilst roping from Super 6-7, while it hovered 70 feet above the streets. He suffered numerous head injuries and required evacuation by Sergeant Jeff Stucker's column of 3 Humvees. While taking Blackburn back to base, Sergeant Dominic Pillar was killed instantly when a bullet struck his head.
Sergeant Pillar's hit!
At around 4:20, Super 6-1 was shot down by an RPG-7. Both pilots, Cliff Walcott and Donovan Briley, were instantly killed, and 2 crew chiefs were severely wounded. Staff Sergeant Daniel Bush and Sergeant Jim Smith survived the crash and began to defend it. An MH6 Little Bird landed nearby the crash site. Keith Jones left the Little Bird and carried Bush back to the Little Bird. Bush and Smith were both evacuated then. Bush later died of his injuries after being shot 4 times defending the crash. A combat search and rescue team were able to fast rope down to the Super 6-1 crash site, despite an RPG hit that crippled their helicopter. The team then moved the wounded men to a nearby collection point where they built a makeshift shelter using Kevlar plates salvaged from Super 6-1's wreckage. During this time, a second Black Hawk, Super 6-4, piloted by Michael Durant, was shot down by an RPG-7 at around 4:40. Most of the assault team had gone to the first crash site. Upon reaching the area, about 90 Rangers and Delta Force found themselves heavily under fire. They were trapped for the night, occupying several nearby houses. At the second crash site, 2 Delta snipers, Master Sergeant Gary Gordon and Sergeant First Class Randy Sugard, were inserted by Super 6-2. They inflicted heavy casualties on the approaching Somali mob. Super 6-2 had kept up fire support for them but was hit by an RPG and was forced to land at Newport. When Gordon was killed, Sugard picked up his CAR-15 and gave it to Durant.
40's gone, man. I'll be outside. Good luck.
Sugard went back around the helicopter's nose and held off the mob for about 10 more minutes before he was killed. The Somalis then overran the crash site and beat Durant close to death. Members of Aidid's militia came and took Durant prisoner. Gordon and Sugard were both posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. Repeated Somali attempts to overrun the first crash site were neutralised by aggressive small arms fire and strafing runs and rocket attacks by AH-6J Little Bird helicopter gunships throughout the night. At At around 2 AM, a relief convoy with elements from Task Force 2, 14th Infantry, 10th Mountain Division, accompanied by Malaysian and Pakistani UN forces, arrived at the first crash site. The convoy consisted of more than 100 UN vehicles. By 6:30 AM, the battle was over. US forces were evacuated to the UN base by the convoy. Whilst leaving the crash site, a group of rangers and Delta operators realised there was no more room left in the vehicles for them, and they were forced to depart the city on foot to a rendezvous point on National Street. This has been commonly referred to as the Mogadishu Mile. In all, 19 US soldiers were killed in action during the battle or shortly after, another 73 were wounded in action. The Malaysian forces lost 1 soldier and had 7 injuries, whilst the Pakistanis also lost 1 soldier and suffered 2 injuries. Somali casualties were heavy, with estimates of fatalities ranging from 315 to over 2,000 combatants.